troubles I have been through. I have even recorded 2 whole videos, one of them 40 minutes long, that unfortunately, due to some technical errors, were not able to be uploaded. I was very disappointed, I assure you. So, I'm going to try again tonight. I'm going to just keep it simple. Read a story. I do so love stories. This one is one that you probably know, but it is in one of its earliest forms. I have the book, the original folk and fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, and it is a translation based on the original stories. Over the years, the Brothers Grimm had edited and changed and refined the stories. So what we have today doesn't always bear exact resemblance to those earliest forms. And this book is one of the first times, it claims to be the very first time, that available in English, all 156 stories from the 1812 and 1815 editions of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. Because they're made up of stories that they collected in their travels, they're not all complete. Some of them are mere outlines of stories. And you can tell, reading some of them, that they are quite rough in nature, but they are still, many of them, very amusing. I'm going to read one that has some personal meaning to me. You see, my hair grows quite quickly, and so growing up, my mother had quite a time maintaining it, because I was quite wild and had a tender scalp and hated her pulling at the knots. But cutting my hair never lasted very long because it would grow back as quickly as she could cut it. And because of this, she obviously took to calling me Rapunzel. And she would read me the story of Rapunzel. I believe a little golden book version, so not this story, but one more cleaned up for children. This original story, I should warn you, it does have some mild violence, and it has some insinuations as to some lewd activity, but it's clean enough, I think. So yeah, I'm just going to read you this original story, and I hope you enjoy it. Once upon a time, there lived a husband and wife who had been wishing for a child for many years, but it had all been in vain. Finally, the woman became pregnant. Now in the back of their house, the couple had a small window that overlooked a fairy's garden filled with She had a great craving to eat some of the lettuce, and yet she knew that she couldn't get any, so she began to waste away and looked wretched. Her husband eventually became horrified and asked what was ailing her. "If I don't get any of that Rapunzel from the garden behind our house, I shall have to die." Her husband loved her very much and thought, no matter what it costs, you're going to get some Rapunzel. So one evening he quickly climbed over the high walls into the garden, grabbed a handful of Rapunzel, and brought the lettuce to his wife. Then she immediately made a salad and ate it with great zest. However, the Rapunzel tasted so good to her, so very good, that her craving for it became 3 times greater by the next day. Her husband knew that if she was ever to be satisfied, he had to climb into the garden once more, and so he went over the wall into the garden, but was extremely terrified when he stood face to face with the fairy, who angrily berated him for daring to come into the garden and stealing her Rapunzel. He excused himself as best he could by explaining that the wife was pregnant and that it had become too dangerous to deny her the Rapunzel. "All right," the fairy finally spoke. "I shall permit you to take as much Rapunzel as you like, but only if you give me the child that your wife is carrying." In his fear, the man agreed to everything, and when his wife gave birth, the fairy appeared at once, named the baby Rapunzel, and took her away. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child under the sun. But when she turned 12, the fairy locked her in a very high tower that had neither doors nor stairs, only a little window high above. Whenever the fairy wanted to enter the tower, she would stand below and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And Rapunzel had radiant hair, as fine as spun gold. Each time she heard the fairy's voice, she unpinned her braids and wound them around a hook on the window. She then let her hair drop 20 yards, and the fairy would climb up on it. One day, a young prince went riding through the forest and came upon the tower. He looked up and saw beautiful Rapunzel in the window. When he heard her singing with such a sweet voice, he fell completely in love with her. However, since there were no doors in the tower and no ladder could ever reach her high window, he fell into despair. Nevertheless, he went into the forest every day until one time he saw the fairy, who called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." As a result, he now knew what kind of ladder he needed to climb up into the tower. He took careful note of the words he had to say, and the next day at dusk he went to the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." So she let her hair drop, and when her braids were at the bottom of the tower, he tied them around him, and she pulled him up. At first Rapunzel was terribly afraid, but soon the young prince pleased her so much that she agreed to see him every day and pull him up into the tower. Thus, for a while, they had a merry time and enjoyed each other's company. The fairy didn't become aware of this until one day Rapunzel began talking and said to her, "Tell me, Mother Gothel, why are my clothes becoming too tight? They don't fit me anymore." "Oh, you godless child," the fairy replied, "what's this I hear?" And she immediately realized that she had been betrayed and became furious. Then she grabbed Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wrapped it around her left hand a few times, picked up a pair of scissors with her right hand, and snip, snap, the hair was cut off. Afterward, the fairy banished Rapunzel to a desolate land where she had to live in great misery, and in the course of time she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. On the same day that the fairy had banished Rapunzel, she fashioned the braids that she had cut off to the hook on the window, and that evening when the prince came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the braids down. But when the prince climbed up into the tower, he was astonished to find the fairy instead of Rapunzel. "Do you know what, you villain?" the angry fairy said. "Rapunzel is lost to you forever." In his despair, the prince threw himself from the tower. He escaped with his life, but he lost both his eyes. Sadly, he wandered around the forest, eating nothing but grass and roots, and did nothing but weep. Some years later, he made his way to the desolate land where Rapunzel was leading a wretched existence with her children. When he heard her voice, it sounded familiar at first, and then he immediately recognized it. She recognized him too and embraced him. 2 of her tears fell upon his eyes, and then his eyes became clear again, and he could see as usual. You can see it's a bit different than the story we're familiar with. More violent, with a much more sudden ending. The early stories don't spend very much time on characterization. They're very black and white. There are good people and bad people. There are kind people and selfish people. Sometimes people learn their lessons and are redeemed, but more often they are punished. In this story, there's quite a bit that's never addressed. We never go back to the parents. Mother Gothel, the fairy, never has any comeuppance of her own. But at least the two find each other again. And even though it doesn't say it, we can assume they live happily ever after. I used to let my hair grow as long as I could and braid it, and then try and lift things with them, to practice until I could become my own ladder. course, would never happen. My hair still grows quite thick and long, very fast. I tend to grow it for as long as I can stand, and it gets down past my lower back before, snip, snap, I cut it all off again. And I cut it very short. I always give the hairdressers such a shock. Everyone always gets so horrified at the idea of cutting off such long, thick hair so drastically. And they all think it must be a spur-of-the-moment decision that they can talk me out of because they don't want me to regret it the next day and blame them. From what I understand, that is a common occurrence. So I have a hard time each time this happens, convincing them that I did know what I wanted, and I assured them I would not regret it, for before very long, my hair would only return. As a matter of fact, a few times my hairdressers, for it tends to be a different one each time, they refuse to do it. When one of my friends cut my hair, she would only cut it to my shoulders, and said she wanted me to think about it for a few days after that before going any shorter. Because we were such good friends, I humored her. And I waited a few days before calling her up and said, "Can you finish now?" And of course she was astonished when, before too long, my hair was already recovered anyway, and she needn't have been so worried. I could never decide whether I liked short hair or long hair better. What do you think? What do you enjoy having the most? When hair is short, it's so easy to take care of. It saves so much time in the shower. And in the summer, it's quite nice, feeling the breeze. It's never in your way, and it dries very quickly. It's quicker and easier to dye it fun colors, and it's much easier to put up in wigs. When I have long hair, I can style it in many fun ways. It feels very elegant. I do feel a bit like a princess. You're able to use beautiful hair sticks to hold it up, or put clips, flowers, and bows into it. I braid it in one thick braid, or in two on either side. I can have it up in a severe bun, or do, tango, space buns. There's various names for it, but the two buns on the top of the head, like Sailor Moon. I enjoy that very much. My hair is currently in the growing out phase, just past my shoulders. And I'm thinking I might not wait until it's fully grown out again before cutting it. I have the urge to go back colors. I let my natural hair grow out this time, just to make sure it was fresh and healthy growth. But I'm ready to put an end to that. I'm going to go multicolors. I'm thinking about a blue with a pink streak, maybe. Pastels. I always think I want that, and then at the last minute change my mind and tend to go for a more vibrant purple. Something darker, brighter, and something that doesn't require quite as much bleach. Pastels need quite a lot of upkeep. I've gotten quite a bit off topic, but hopefully you haven't minded. I really enjoy just handling this book. It's very sturdy, and whether I'm rubbing it, or tapping it, or reading the stories, I always find it quite soothing. Growing up, there weren't a lot of people who were terribly familiar with Rapunzel's story. When I was a child, you see. Now, of course, Disney got their hands on it, so everyone, I think, knows it. I know before that, occasionally the story would be addressed, and so it's not that Rapunzel was an uncommon childhood character. She was just never a favorite. So I was quite happy to see Disney and what they did with it, because they give her more agency. Rapunzel gets to make more of her own choices. I like that. And I think it's fun that they include Mother Gothel's name. From the original story as well. You may have noticed they call her a fairy, and yet she's having to climb up the braid. You see, many early fairy stories, they're not actually winged at all. It is the little pixies and such who have the wings, whereas fairies were more human-sized, as we imagine elves now. Not Santa's elves or shoemaker's elves, but fairies and elves were tall, regal, more Lord of the Rings type creatures, stately and beautiful. And so Mother Gothel would not have been able to fly, but she would have had magic. And there are a good many stories warning about dealing with the Fae. What to watch out for. Because it did not often end well for the humans. So I'm not surprised that poor husband gave in immediately when the fairy caught him, because there are a number of horrible parents for their sadness at losing the child. I like that in the Disney version she gets to go home again and reunite with her parents. Although I do regret that they removed the stealing the lettuce part of the story. I'll have to tell you another time one of my favorite fairy stories. It's very short, so maybe I'll put together a few different stories that warn of dealing with fairies. One of the videos I had recorded was me reading another Grimm fairy tale, but it's not in this book. I actually don't have it in one of my storybooks, of which I have many. For some reason it isn't used very often, but it's my absolute favorite. But I have to read it from the internet, which is more difficult to do on my phone with my basic video app, you see. I had been trying a different recording process with a different program, and YouTube would not let me upload it. So I need to spend time writing that story down so that I can read it to you like this. On another night after that, I recorded sounds, tapping sounds and crinkling sounds on yet another program that also did not work. And unfortunately, I became ill and had to spend some weeks getting my breath back and to be able to talk for long periods of time without coughing. So I apologize for the time that passes between videos. It is not my intention. But I am new to this, and as I figure out better ways to work, hopefully they can become more regular. Thank you for having this little story time with me and for allowing me to ramble a bit about hair and fairies. I enjoyed this quiet time, just you and I hope it helps take your mind off other things and relax you so that you might be able to get some sleep. Don't feel bad if you can't sleep. I know it's hard when you need to be sleeping and your body will not let you. Insomnia or stress or anxiety or illness, whatever it is keeping you awake, it's very easy for us to be worked up about the lack of sleep, which only makes it harder. It's a cycle. But take comfort in knowing that studies are showing that even if you just lay there quietly with your eyes closed, resting, recovering with the intention to sleep, allows your body to accomplish some of its tasks for the night. For instance, closing your eyes keeps them from drying out and lets them relax and refresh from a hard day. Letting your body rest keeps everything from getting too worn out. It's good to take some time to stay still and just enjoy that quiet as best you can. So when you can't sleep, it may be tempting to continue to play games or entertain yourself in some way, but go ahead and let yourself pretend to sleep, and you'll find yourself more refreshed in the morning than had you not. And I hope that listening to these videos, mine or anyone else's, can help make that easier for you to do. Come back and see me again sometime.